Welcome back to Giro3 YouTube channel. Okay, in today's video we're having a look at the latest project I'm working on, or building up I should say. Basically it's going to be an Emotator 1300 rotator, an AC one. So basically I'm going to take a bit of a run through of this. I'll show you the controller and everything, and the casings and stuff, but we'll look at the controller first. This controller I built up, and I'll be doing more of this later on. So this is the controller. So it's a CR-4 controller, dial preset, with some new display in it, new LED lighting, needle and everything else, but I'll go for a big complete run through it later on. New back done on it, new terminals and everything else, so I'll do a complete one on that later on. I'll just get out of the road for the present moment. So basically the casings have been glass bead blasted and then etch primed and then painted in this pewter enamel, epoxy enamel. I've also, the insides had to be glass bead blasted as well, and then I resealed the inside with a very fine coat of clear for metal surfaces, just to physically reseal it. So I'm just going to move forward with these. Now the lower casing was done. The insides, this one didn't need doing, but the outside's been painted and it's all in good condition now. So just move that to there. Bearing ring, same deal. It was glass bead blasted all over, and then I polished the actual track, and it's been painted in the same process as the other one. Basically, we'll move the motor apart aside for first thing. We'll get to this mast clamp assembly. So basically, I never had the proper mast clamp for this one. So what I'm using is a mast clamp, a lower mast clamp set for a Create, and then I've basically done a few mods to it. So their one is for their lower mast clamp for their rotators, which means it'll be upside down. So I have to grind a piece out of here, stop it flaring out, to fit into this bit of a hump here. And basically since it's going to be sitting this way, I had to put drain holes in here, I'll stop this flaring out, and I've also put drain holes into each of these holes. Normally this is not a problem when it's sitting that way around, because water will just drain straight out. So this is going to be sitting on the top, so I've actually had to do this, but I've also inserted stainless steel recoil inserts into the 4 mounting holes for the mast clamps. So that's this one. So the mast sits down and locates with this tapered piece here and rests in that section, and the mast clamps will sit and bolt, and they're just clamping. They're not holding any vertical force. The vertical force is held by this piece here, so they're just clamping here. So the mast clamps, again, this is all brand new. So basically I've had them glass bead blasted to get rid of the paint that originally was painted in. I have then masked up this center section here, the clamping sections, and that is raw aluminium, which has been glass bead blasted, and I have etch primed and painted the rest of them, both the same. I'm using all gal bolts and bits and pieces with this. Only difference I've done is I replaced the mast clamping bolts, the mounting bolts, with slightly longer ones, get more downward force, and we've got the original bolts that clamp down through here into the actual the top housing. These will be Loctited into position when it's all done. We have, as usual, I'm putting in some LTW plugs and sockets, but all of the nuts and bolts and bits and pieces here. So we'll sort of move into what I've done with the actual the motor assembly and gearbox assembly. The original assembly that I bought, this whole assembly here, was originally, let's move these back over here a bit. That was original. Oh, that's not the thing to do. I want to turn around that way so I don't fall over again. So the original assembly was an 1105 rotator, which had a dodgy motor. So I've basically pulled the old motor off, and I have replaced it with one I took out of a out of a Kempro KR-2000. This is a 25 volt motor, which you can probably just read there, 25 volt. And there's the motor start capacitor for it, sitting there. I've had to do a bit of chamfering here, so it's a bit of a hexagon shape here to get the fit in, because I don't have the other little gear that the 1300s normally have, but I've replaced one of these gears in here with one that's suited for the 1300. So basically I have physically made all the positions here. I've fixed the shaft. I'll show you more of that later when I strip it down. This is basically at the last dry build before I strip it down to physically rebuild it with grease and everything inside. So this is totally dry, and basically just so I can check that everything's fitting properly, do some final tests, and then I can strip it down and show you what I've done. So with saying that, we might as well get into this. So basically we have the limit switch assembly here at the top. So I'm going to take that out of the way here at the present moment, and that will get that. We'll start stripping this down because it's going to be stripped down anyway, and then I'll be doing a video of the rebuild. So I'll pull this right out of here. So all the wiring is now all been redone with tin copper cable. So that's the actual the limit switch assembly. Put that aside. One of the major mods I've done is to the potentiometer. The potentiometer is now a 5-turn 500 ohm, because this controller, this CR-4 controller, is a 500 ohm controller. So I need to have a 500 ohm potentiometer. So basically it is a 5-turn and is a direct drive onto that gear there. I can show you the original. This is the original one that come out of this one. It's a series, it's a standard potentiometer, a 600 ohm, which doesn't suit this anyway. But they get a lot of movement in them, so I can hold this here and I can bobble this back and forward, and it moves everywhere. And a lot of reduction gearing. You've got to get really tight to physically make sure it doesn't just wobble around like this is doing and not turn the potentiometer. So I've never been a big fan of these ones, but you just have to get things really super tight to get them to work properly, and then it puts a lot of load onto the actual potentiometer. So that one there is now done. It's out of here, and this new one is in. So this 5-turn. And I've had this gear made up. I've shown you other videos of this gear when it was made up. So it fits on there. It's a laser centered 3D printed gear, not a melted plastic gear. So this has a higher temperature rating and all this stuff. So that's a new, and it's mounted on a stainless steel plate. And that's that. The actual those two things I just pulled off. I now have M3 recoil screw, recoil inserts in these because the holes were stripped out when I got this, so we had to do that. So we'll do a disassembly here. We'll pull out the top shafts and remove the gears. This is what I like about these rotators. The gears are solid. They're not stamped out and then set together in 3 or 4 stack. These are actually a solid gear. On 12mm shafts, not 10mm or 8mm, 12mm shafts. So the Emotator 1105, 1200 and 1300 all run the same casing, sub-chassis. Only difference is gear ratio changes in them, and normally the bottom plate changes and the motor changes, of course. So basically what I've done is, we'll work at the bottom here, I've made provision for the 25 volt motor in here. This is a 1300 microfarad motor start capacitor, so I've made provision for it so it doesn't hit anything. They used to sit down really low on another one. So the 1300 is normally a 100 volt motor, which is identical to this. I just happen to have a 25 volt version, and I'm making it work with it. So basically the screws are all just done up loosely for now, just to check everything is working properly and can be assembled properly. So we'll get these out. We're using the original bolts and screws and bits and pieces. So we'll strip him down. I had to scallop a little of this out, so you've got to lift this up at the right point to get it up and out. I'll get our, I'm using a bit of heat shrink in there to keep grease and everything off the off everything. So we'll lift it up a little bit, get the screws out. I had to basically, I'm just making this up out of things that I've got because parts are getting hard to get for these. Not saying you can't get them, but you know, you can't buy them new anymore. But they are fairly robust rotator. Okay, so get those bolts out of there. Okay, whoops, we lost our gears. So we'll put this back on here for now. So there's our gearbox itself. So basically the drive gear that's driving the potentiometer is this one here. So again, a solid gear welded together, and that's the drive gear. This is the top plate, so it's a steel plate. It's 5mm, as you can see, or 6mm, 5mm, I think it is, in the aluminium casing, housing I should say. We then have the next gear, which is normally the gear that they run these. So the next gear is again solid gear. But in the actual 1105, they don't have this next gear. They have one of these gears which drives it. So I've replaced this with this double stack gear, which the 1300 normally has in them. But what I've also done is I've fixed these shafts. As I say, I've rolled the base of this over, and these have been, I've made new shafts for this as well. Made up new shafts, and they also have, I didn't bring me circlips, but it's circlips. Knew I forgot something. So they have these circlips on here to keep the weight of these heavy gears off the fast moving gears down, the faster moving gears down here. So basically we'll get these off here now. So basically they sit into two grooves. We'll pull that next gear off. Now this is a stamped out gear and punched back together again, and so it's a double stack gear, as you can see. Now as you can see, this is what happens when people don't align their gears properly. The next gear hits it and it starts chewing grooves in the actual gear itself. So I'll clean it as best I can. So it is what it is. So basically we get the next one out, and then I'll show you these how the shafts are done. The next gear, stamped out gear, fast moving gear, assembled gear in a sense, not a one piece gear. I can't get the next gear out because I've got to move the motor for that one. So basically this sub chassis is the sub chassis for the 1105. I've just made the motor fit from the this motor fit to it. The 1300 normally has another gear, and then the motor sits off the side. So I just had to do things differently and make it work without changing the position of everything. Just had to change, as I said before, just a bit of finagling on the casing, because these casings are quite thick. So I was able to physically grind these down, shape it to get it to work, and then because this has been fully refurbished and everything as well. So as I said before, the shafts have been punch locked in so they don't move. Those grooves have been cut into here, so they just grab. They don't spin, they actually hold tight, so they can't spin around and cause problems. So we have two of those, this one, that one there. So we shall actually get the this plate off now, because I've got to get this gear off to physically grease everything up. So I've got to take this off anyway, and I can show you the spacers and all that sort of stuff. So again, stainless steel screws, nuts, bolts, spring wash, shake-proof washers and lots of stuff. And you can see colours on here. I have coloured the screws because it had to be a certain length screw, because this purple screw goes in and holds into the casing, and I've actually re-tapped it because the original screws that hold the top casing to the main chassis of these things was only a 3mm, so I've actually made it go to a 4mm and re-tapped it and made it into a 4mm. So there we go. I'll get this one out of here. The same deal with this one. This one goes into the casing, so he's painted purple to match up with that, also so I know where everything is. And the last one, this is a standard one. I should have painted this green, but I didn't. Whatever, doesn't matter. So we'll lift that out of there. Get get that out of there. Put that aside for now. This is like a one-off of this whole scenario. I'll probably build another one if I had enough pieces to do it. So as you can see, we have these spacers here, 2 green ones and 2 purple ones, and they go over the certain points. As you can see, the purple ones go straight into the casing, and these ones use the actual original flange. I had to cut the original flange off because that was impeding going into the side of the casing. So basically this motor is sitting down in here like that, and it's hard up against the casing. I should take it up over here, hard against the casing, so it's against that casing, running up against these points here, so it sits in there like that. Up the other way around, of course. I'll get it right in a minute. Sitting that way around. Hard to get, you know what I mean, just sitting there like that. So that's how it's sitting, but low down, of course. So it has a slight taper to that casing, so I had to give this a slight taper. You probably can see it in there. It's got a bit of a slight taper to it. I've given it just enough to allow me to get movement and whatnot. So that's all good. So basically the BK brake has been assembled and greased. That is all ready to go. So we're off and running in that department. So that's all good. Now we can get this up here. We can take this final gear off. Now as well as fixing the shafts, and you see both the fixing points, I've just rolled the ends of these over. I've actually physically put the spacers in and glued them in place so they can't be lost, and that actually helps keep everything stable as well. So there's the original 1105 sub chassis. So there we are. We're up to that stage. I'm going to stop there, and basically I shall get another stitch this to the next video, and we shall move forward, and I'll start reassembling this. And then the final thing I'll do is I'll strip the controller down, and well, not strip it down, but take the casings off, and I'll show you what I did to the insides of this, and then we'll go from there. So I can actually start now the rebuilding process and get this motor gearbox assembly all back together again, and start the rebuild process, which will catch you soon. Bye. Okay, we're back. Righto, I have now set up the first drive gear. The problem with these, they're just a fine tooth. You've got to have just a little bit of backlash on all the gears. You've got to rotate around, make sure this gear is not exactly, most of these gears aren't exactly 100% square. So it takes a little while to get the actual backlash in all positions all the way around, otherwise it binds up. So this is now done. All the bolts have been, screws and bolts have been done up nice and tight, and I can now move on to assembling these gears. I'll be back once I get this assembled up and the clips on, and we shall carry on. Okay, I have the next 2 gears on, and I've put the circlips in, so now the gears can't lift up any more than they are, and now I can actually assemble the rest of these 2 gears, and we can move forward. Catch you soon. Okay, final 2 gears are on, all greased up. As regarding grease, the grease I use is molybdenum disulfide. It's the same grease used in the CV joints of front wheel drive cars and 4-wheel drives, of course, independent suspension ones. So okay, so basically I'm going to now drop on the top housing. I'm going to go away and get it all bolted up. So basically now we've got all these gears all greased up and everything. We just drop them into his position here. Beauty of when the shafts are fixed into here, you can do, I drive this motor and make sure all the gears are running freely and everything. One thing you can't do when these things have got loose shafts, they just fall over the country. So now you actually can visually hold things in position. You can get them all set up and do all testing and stuff. So having a fixed shafts is way better than flopping around like anything. So yeah, well, literally I'll be back soon, and we shall get the next section on. Rightio, we're back again. Little short snippets here. So the top housing is on, or the sub chassis is on, all good. I've given it a test run, all looks good. So all I need to do now is assemble the final drive gears in and their 12mm shafts. So I shall be back shortly after doing that. Bye. Rightio, final drive gears are in. As you can see, I've taken it for another test drive. It's all looking good. A bit of grease there. So we're going to put in the limit switch assembly. So basically we grab the wires from down here for now, like that. That's what I'm doing, yes. Again, as I think I said before, these have all been rewired for all new tin copper wire. So I've got rid of all the old copper wire itself, and I'm just using tinned wire only, all brand new. So we shall set this back into here. We can actually get ourselves all lined back up again. Makes it so much better with those stainless steel recoil inserts in the threads there. Okay, you may or may not have noticed, I may have mentioned it. I've punched the side of this plate to just keep this shaft further down inside because there's not much hanging out the bottom. I just screwed myself up. So I'd like to put a bit of a punch mark on that. As you can see there, sort of a punch mark on it. Just close to the actual centre of the shaft, just to stop it from lifting up, because this is put in there so actually that holds the shaft in. But with the I'll try that again. With that sitting so high, the shaft can actually work its way up higher. So I'm trying to keep the shaft from potentially coming out from the bottom of the actual, and loosening it off too much. So there. Okie dokie. So I've got to actually put this in now. The actions of the potentiometer, without getting the wires in the road, which is going to be interesting. Maybe I need to rethink that. Duh. I'll put this in first. I'll put the wiring in. Duh. Oh, you get that. These big jobs. So put him back in there. Mesh it up with the drive gear. These nice little screws, they've got spring washers on them. I'll show you one of them if we can focus on it. Just a little M3 has a spring washer on it. It's only gold zinc plated, but I've got a hold of these and they work really well, just the right length for what I want. Righty-o. Now we can actually start feeding the wires through. Probably should have fed this one through first, but whatever. And then I can put my cover back over it again and get things moving forward. So we'll get these all back in here. So then I probably should have dropped these in first, but whatever. On the wires on the right side, they're probably all tangled up. There we go. More wires you can poke a stick at. Helps running all new wiring as well, since these rotators are getting a bit older, I suppose you can call, but being the fact that they only had copper wire in them, pays to just replace the wiring. So the only wiring that will be original will be what's in the actual motor. Rewiring those is a bit of a, in these particular motors is not fun. Righty-o, I'm going to go away and slide my sleeve back on again and get this all cable tied up inside. So and then we're up to this stage. So I can put the potentiometer back on again, and we shall carry on. Catch you soon. Okay, I have now got all the wiring done and tied off. Got the little sleeve over this as well. I've terminated the LCW socket, and I've also done the little mods I normally do to these, and the little locators for the little these little cutouts here, those little locators. I'll show you what I've done here. In the rotator housing, you see that's where the original 3 screws go through that hold the original flange of the output flange here of the socket. So inside I've actually replaced those. If we can get some light in there, it would be probably a good idea. Probably can't see them. There is actually 3 long grub screws, same 3 grub screws in there, which have been glued into place, and those 3 locate up with the 2 on the side, and there's a slight recess at the top as well. So what I'm going to be doing, I'm going to physically drop this into there. I'll take the actual lock nut off. It's all a bit of a juggle this to try and get it in. Trying to hold this bloody motor is not exactly light, and neither is the gears in these things. So there's enough room to put your hand in here like this, get it in the right position. Okay, that's what I'm doing. Rest that there like that for now. Get the other hand in here, try and get this to locate. Put the nut on loosely for now, because we've got to probably push it back inside when you've got the bearing ring on, so we'll just get that happening into there. And we'll get this to drop into its rightful place. Get all the wiring out of the road. That's better. There we go. So that's in there now. There we go. So we can drop the 4 bolts in on these. I'll be going away and I'll do those up and get them all ready to be fixed on. So basically I can now move forward and move on to the next section, and I'll be back shortly. Okay, I've finished bolting up the bolts that hold the top sub chassis in. The next thing I've got to do is I've got to do the alignment and everything, so I'll be going away and doing that. But in the meantime, what will be doing is I'll be attaching the this top flange to the top of this casing, so they create bearings, create mast clamps will actually physically go on. So what I'll be doing, I'll be Loctiting these bolts. They've got spring washers on them. Oh, wrong ones. I've grabbed the wrong ones. Where are the other ones? Where are they? Oh, they're over here. So these ones have got number 3, I think they are. Phillips heads in the top. So, and they've got spring washers, all gal. So I'm going to be Loctiting these into here. I'll be screwing the whole thing up, and then that will be finished, and then I can actually move forward. I can go do all the alignment part of it, and then I'll be back shortly when I show this all bolted up. But that's the next thing on the agenda, so that means we can sort of move forward a bit. So that's what it will look like eventually, so we shall carry on.